Hey everybody, so I wanted to come on and give you a couple of tutorials on the different theories because I know we don't have time in our live sessions to actually go through each theory, but I want to highlight some of the concepts from the theories and just talk through them for you. So the chapter that we're on now is focused on the early social structural theories. And the first one I want to talk about is this concentric zone model developed by Park and Burgess. And you've been reading about Sean McKay and the Chicago School of Crime and how they were looking at crime and trying to understand the role of place or neighborhood or community and the factors that might impact whether or not there is a high crime rate. And this early work that was done in the 1920s, 1930s, and 40s in the Chicago School led to the development of the Chicago School of Criminology, the development of social disorganization theory, and it really was combining this environmental or ecological kind of study of the environment, combining it with looking at crime rates. And so what the concentric zone model does, it is a graphic illustration of the dynamics that can be at play in different areas within the city. And so recall that Chicago is obviously it's a city, and it's looking at how the city developed over time and why you have higher crime rates in some parts of the city compared to other parts of the city. And so what they did, and this was high tech back then, I take push pins and they stuck push pins into a map of Chicago, and what the map revealed was that crime was not something that manifested everywhere, and it was a constant present. It was concentrated in particular areas. And so in looking at the areas that were identified according to the concentric zone model, we see that area 1 is considered to be the central business district. That's what the CBD stands for, central business district. So this would be kind of your downtown area if you think about a city as having a center city. And then zone 2 would be your zone of transition. And the zone of transition is that area where you've got a lot of influx of people moving in, you have people moving out. It's really this area of the city where if you're new to the area, and remember, this is back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s when you had this mass migration of immigrants coming from Eastern Europe, and then you have African Americans fleeing the South and heading north for better job opportunities. And you have this dynamic at play where people were moving out of previously rural or agricultural environments, moving into the city, but they don't have the resources, and so they're not able to live in the higher socioeconomic status areas. So they're in this zone of transition, right? Trying to find jobs, trying to make money, and just trying to exist. Then when you become a little bit more successful, then you can move out to the working class zone. So in the working class zone, you have kind of this middle class or middle income people who were able to transition out of this zone of transition, which sounds kind of weird, but they were able to move out into the more stable working class zone. And then as the farther out you get to the residential zone, this is where people have homes on kind of the outskirts of the city. It's not quite suburbs, like it could be, I guess it could be considered suburban. And then you've got the residential zone, which is kind of deep into the deep suburbs where people like catch trains to come into the city. They have to actually drive to get into the city to get to work. All right. And so we have these different environments, these different areas of the city. And this is a circular, right, concentric zone because that's how certain cities developed, right? They started at the center city and then they built out farther and farther into the residential and then commuter zones. Not every city has developed like this. But if you think about it, because we said last class that criminological theories are developed within the context of their time. So think about all the things that were happening in Chicago and in other cities during the 1920s and 30s with the influx of populations from different areas. It resulted in kind of an increase in crime rates. And where were the crime rates increasing? Here in this zone 2, the zone in transition. The zone of transition is what we would consider to be a socially disorganized area. And the elements of the social disorganization would be high population turnover, ethnic heterogeneity, which just means that there are a lot of different people from different cultures. And so, not that that's a negative thing in and of itself, but if you can't communicate with your neighbors, you can't communicate with the people around you, then it can leave you kind of feeling like you're not really embedded in the neighborhood, like you don't really have a stake in the neighborhood. And again, because this is a zone in transition, this is the place where people aren't really settling in. They're just there temporarily, hopefully ready to move out farther and farther into this residential area, working class area. And if we think about it, we see the waves of immigrants coming in back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. So you have Italian immigrants, you have immigrants from Eastern Europe, you have immigrants coming from other parts of the globe, and they were able to move out into these residential and working class zones because they were able to kind of successfully assimilate into the society. And so you have this move and you have the development of these, and you can think about it, you have like a lot of ethnic neighborhoods. I know when I lived in Baltimore, there were ethnic neighborhoods where groups settled in, and they became part of that community and became embedded or entrenched in those areas. And so you might have like they call them like Little Italy, Chinatown, things like that, right? Now, that's really the this concentric zone model. That's really what researchers had developed in order to explain why you had the higher crime rates. And this pattern emerged, and it seemed, and based on what the research they were conducting, it seemed like it was stable. It appeared that these crime rates in the zone of transition were stable no matter what ethnicity moved into this zone in transition. So if you have waves of Italian immigrants who came in, or Irish immigrants, or you have Eastern European immigrants coming in, and they were able to come into this zone in transition and then eventually move out into the working class and residential zones. However, this social mobility came to a stop at a certain point, and now we have a population in these center cities who are trapped there, and there's no pathway out of the zone of transition, and so you have high crime rates continuing to be seen in this zone in transition. Okay, now we will talk about in more detail during the class about the contemporary or the current status of this concentric zone model, and we'll discuss whether or not it's still relevant when we're thinking about crime, we're thinking about social disorganization, and how crime develops within a particular city, and how crime rates may or may not remain stable over time. So hopefully this little clip will help you kind of understand the Chicago school and this concentric zone model, and what it means when we talk about crime rates in the zone in transition, and how you have the city, the center city is where the business district is, but as you go farther out, crime rates tend to decrease out in these areas while it still is relatively high in zone 2. All right, so hopefully this will help, and I will give you additional tutorials. So, all right, I'll see you later. Bye.